Welcome to Midlife Women Entrepreneurs, where you'll find real stories, practical strategies, and the mindset shifts you need for entrepreneurship. If you've ever felt like midlife was too late to launch a business, write a book, or chase a dream, think again. I'm Lynette Turner, your host, and I'm bringing you inspiring conversations and practical tips to help nudge you forward and keep growing in midlife. So let's jump in. Welcome, Jodi Barrett, to Midlife Women Entrepreneurs. You and I met through a very dear friend of both of ours, actually, but we had never met before. He told me I needed to meet this girl, and we met for coffee, and I couldn't believe your story. It was just I think we were just running with very similar parallels, obviously different experiences and all that kind of stuff. But I'm so glad I met you while you were sort of sharing who you were and what you're doing. We're both from Saskatchewan. I just thought I'd love to have you on my podcast. So here you are. I'm going to hand the floor over to you. Give yourself a bit of a background, and then we'll take it from there.
Wow. First of all, thank you, Lynette, for having me. And it
Yeah.
was a pleasure meeting you and absolute pleasure being here today. And I hope today to just share a little bit of my story from my journey from honestly 2013 until present time today, because it's been quite a ride. Yeah. So it'll be fun to get into the depths of that.
I felt like your story that I wanted you to share was really sort of starting back in 2013. So take us a little bit through there. Where were you in 2013? What was happening?
Okay. Yeah. It's a pretty easy pinpoint to go to because there was a moment in 2013 that kind of hit me, smacked me upside the head pretty hard. I was married at the time. I have 3 kids and my kids were in school already, and I was struggling, but not really recognizing my struggle. We spent a lot of time in the gym working out. I worked out 3-4 times a week. And then when I wasn't there, I was running probably 2 to 3 times a week. And I had a moment when I went to the gym and I used the gym to navigate, like my training, always how I felt and how I kept myself on track. And that day I looked back at my reflection in the mirror and I had such a huge disconnect for how I was feeling. I saw this physical looking woman staring back at me. And I kind of looked at her thinking, I can't lift anything in this room today. Everything looked heavy. And that terrified me because that's how I navigated life, right? Like if I was stressed out, I would go for a run. If I was, something wasn't feeling good, I would lift. And I thought, oh my God, I was like, what's going on here? And that day, the biggest thing I lifted up was my gym bag, and I left and I went for a walk, and I decided that I was strong physically, but there was so much internal workings that I needed work on. And that's the day I decided that I needed to, likely at the moment, leave my marriage and figure out how that looked and navigated. That was my big shift moment that it changed my world, that moment.
So how did you know you needed to leave the marriage? Like you were looking in the mirror, you're looking around, there wasn't one single thing that you felt the energy to lift. And then you were like, okay, I'm strong externally, beautiful, strong, but internally I am a mess. And how did you know it was your marriage?
I think we're like, I'm a big advocate thinking that we all know what really we're supposed to do. I was a great avoider, and there's still things in life that I avoid. And then it's like, oh yeah, when you're like, we avoid them. And then when we own it, I guess it was the moment I owned up that I needed to make a change. And
Right.
it kind of led there. And I think I overtrained to try to avoid it. And maybe it would get better if I just don't listen to that voice inside my head or inside my heart that says I'm struggling. But it was a big moment when I saw physically how strong I was. Because I've written about this a fair amount, and I used to always write, that was the minute I was broken. I felt broken. And then now I'm like, I think because the last year has been such a pivotal moment for me. I look back and I think it was the moment I actually got brave.
Right. Oh yeah, I like that. I love that. So a lot of people wouldn't, right? They would stay because how old were your kids at the time?
My youngest, they were 13, 11, and 8.
Yeah. So often we stay in these marriages because we think, oh, how can I do that with my kids? Especially at that age too. We know that, sometimes people say, well, it's easier to leave earlier, or I stay until they're out of the house and then we leave. But honestly, I've never heard one kid say, yeah, I'm glad my mom stayed in this terrible marriage until I was done university, kind of thing. So what happens though after that? You went for this walk, you realized, okay, yeah, my marriage is over. I need to start shifting the focus on me, and not on the external me, but on the internal me. So tell me what you did after that.
Yeah, that was because I was a stay-at-home mom, right? So that was a big change for me, because eventually when that shifted was, I had my kids with me 100% of the time. They were everything, filled my day, my evenings, everything. So it went from that to, okay, what am I going to do for work now? And I always laugh because I call it the shortest job I've ever had in my life. It was 6 days. 6 days I worked at a dental office as a receptionist. And I'm not if you get to know me, I make sure I'm even when I decided not to stay in my marriage, it wasn't like an overnight. I woke up one morning and looked at myself in the mirror and thought, oh yeah, it's time. It was a process of years, trying to sift through things. So when the 6 days arrived and I'm like, yeah, I think I hate this job. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't quit. Like, who quits something 6 days? Like, that is not me at all. And I remember reaching out to my cousin, who is a really dear friend of mine. I was telling him this, and he's like, well, maybe your lesson here is you don't have to think on something for years before you decide. That
Yeah.
you don't have to sit with things forever before you make the change if you're really not enjoying something. So yeah, so I was like, right? Yeah, so then it was just like finding where I fit in work, right? What did I want to do? And I call it I had to go through I launched an online auction company and sold leggings. I did everything until the moment I was just fed up, and I'm like, I just need to be me. And I didn't even know what me was. So I thought, well, how do you find out who me is? It was maybe by finding things I also didn't like. So that was the beginning of going through that.
So, okay, so you did the dental office thing for 6 days. You get this really awesome feedback from your cousin that was like, I mean, I think it's so easy for us all to look at you, and I could give you so much advice, Jodi, and then
Right.
you could look at me and say, oh, Lynette, you need to la, 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 but we can't see it ourselves. So it's so wonderful when you can find somebody like that in your life to do that. So you quit, and then is that when you said you started the online auction, and then you started to sell leggings? And from what I sounds of it, you were shifting your identity really from being the stay-at-home mom to a full-time entrepreneur, and one that, in a business that you really love. And maybe so just talk a little bit about that. What is it that you're doing? Because even that story of starting this business took a bunch of tenacity as well to get to where you wanted to be.
Okay, I'm going to give you a short little back chunk here about how I figured out what I would do for my own business. When I was there was two other people that we did the online auction. It was 2 a.m. I was pricing salt and pepper shakers because, people bring things in, like 12 boxes. It was 2 a.m. I'm sitting on concrete floor. And I was like, I think I hate this job. And I'm like, if I ever own another business, I'm going to love what I do because of the hours that you have to put in. And, when I started my first company in the fitness industry, so I did certifications with kettlebells and teaching, instructing classes. But the backstory behind that was when I was leaving my marriage, I was going to leave the family home, and I was going to rent an apartment for me and my kids. And I remember talking to a landlord, and he said to me, he's like, I can't rent this to you, because he goes, you haven't worked for 11 and a half years. And
yeah,
I felt sick because now I'm like, okay, now I've made this big family unit change. I can't even make a home for my kids. And so when I did the Kettlebell Kickboxing Canada, the root of it was certifications. And it was certifications that was about speaking to women in the sense of find something that makes you happy. outside of your roles of being a mom, being a wife. And if you get to make some money while you do that, that's wonderful. Because maybe, I don't know, maybe you'll be saving to buy yourself the outfit that you wanted. Or maybe the other backside of the story was a woman that was in an abusive relationship. She got certified. She was able to put money away to allow her the ability. And then it just rolled from that into teaching more classes and then launching my first studio space in Saskatchewan, in Regina. And that was also chaos because I opened the studio. The day I was in the space was the day they were closing us down.
Because of COVID. Yeah. So let's summarize that a little bit. So you've got the online auction. You actually like to be an entrepreneur, but you're thinking, I don't really like pricing salt and pepper shakers at 2:00.
Right.
So if I'm going to be an entrepreneur, because I know the time and effort it takes to be an entrepreneur, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something that I love. And I love working out. Always have, always will. So you did some research around the kettlebells and getting certified, thinking, okay, well, not only could this give me some purpose through helping other women find their strength, it also is allowing me to be this entrepreneur and also to be able to get a lease for my apartment, because men thinking like, oh, this is a woman that can't afford the rent, so I'm not going to rent to her, which is another whole other story. But so now, you're getting things going. You're starting to realize, okay, I'm actually really liking it, and people are really starting to show up. And so I'm going to open this studio. The studio is in where I was born and raised, Regina, Saskatchewan. So you are opening the studio, but then like 2 or 3 days before the studio opens, it's March and we get this worldwide stay-at-home order. So now you're like, oh shit, now what? So go from there.
March 17th was the exact day I was standing there. My phone starts going crazy and I'm like, oh my God, what do you do? And my philosophy always has been, if you stand still, you become stagnant. So I always choose to move forward, even if I'm uncertain of what moving forward looks like, because I always think that if I move forward, at least I'm going forward, and I can always go here or there, right?
Pivot along the way. Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Figure
Just
it
get
out.
on the path. Yeah, exactly.
So decided go ahead with that. Ironically, the 6 months before, I was discussing an app with a company down the States, and they recommended an online platform in that December. So honestly, 48 hours, I had handed out bells to everybody who was in studio, and we didn't miss a beat. Friday, our 5:30 class was like this for the first time. Online. Yeah. And then we just did that for as long as we had to. And then they actually let us back in July. And so when we came back together, we were in a new space. And so lots of lessons learned in opening a brick and mortar.
Yeah, but for sure.
Yeah. So when I started with just myself teaching. And then by the time when we closed things down, I had 5 other trainers teaching also.
Okay, so you just said something. So when we close things down, so fast forward, the studio's open, you're making it through COVID, but you end up deciding to close the studio down. The journey's still not fully complete, right? So take us through a little bit of that.
Yeah, brick and mortar, what I learned is it was a challenge. And interesting enough, the summer before I did close down, I also was going through the process of publishing my first memoir, my book. And that summer I was struggling with, what am I going to do? It's like I was my dream to build this, and I wanted to build them across the country. And I'm like, this was the start. And when you're faced with reality of is not happening. And I probably went through the summer a little bit again, maybe put some blinders on. I'm like, if I just focus and I work harder, things will just work out. And ironically, editing my book at that time, I was mad because I was like, I'm editing my book and I want this time to just be so happy about this. And then I started reading, and because you got to read what you wrote. And I was like, okay, you do hard things. You've picked yourself up the floor many, many times. And apparently this is one of those times where you really have to, sit down, look at your business model, what's working, what's not, what can you save, what do you have to let go. And I think Well, I don't think I know by editing my book. Like, I think the universe's timing's always, we sometimes think it's
Divine.
not on, we don't sometimes think it's not on track when it's not going the way we want it to. When we can look back and reflect at it, it's usually, it's pretty, on point. So that kind of
Yeah.
helped me get through that. So I actually published my book in October the 3rd, and I ended up having closing studio on the last day of November
Of what
of
year?
2023.
2023. Okay. So the studio opens for a couple, 3 years, but you decide to write a memoir in there too. What was the catalyst behind the memoir? And I asked that question because I feel like I've said it before, we all have a book in us. It's just, what do I write? Would anybody even read it? What am I doing? Like, what stories am I really going to tell? How are people going to find themselves in my story? And so how did you get started on the book, the memoir?
I started journaling when my middle daughter was sick. When she was born, she spent a lot of time her first year in the hospital. I just started journaling, and then I started journaling what I was going through. And then when I did that, I was like, and then when I transitioned into, being 41 and launching my first, company across the country to certify people, I was like writing these stories. Like, I fly to New York by myself, and I'm the person who never even flew alone before, and I'm getting on this plane to go after this wild and crazy dream. So I would write it, and I'd, start sharing little bits and pieces of it along the way on my social, and people would start commenting, "When's the book coming? When's the book coming?" And so seed kind of got planted. One day I was like, yeah, like I'd wrote a chapter in a book before, and I just decided when I first wanted to write it, I wanted to write it to share, because I always say my story is uniquely mine, but I find that my stories and a lot of events in my life, like me and you talking, are very similar. I always say I picked 16 Sundays. I went every Starbucks, like the Starbucks back home. I'd go every Sunday. I dedicated an hour for sure where I'd sit down and I'd write, because I wanted to finish on my birthday in May.
Yeah.
And I finished. And when I finished, I wasn't sure I wanted to share it because it was such a healing process for me. But again, I had that nagging thought in my head, and just the power of sharing. And that's why I wrote the book, because we get to sit down, you and me and whoever's listening, and go, I don't feel so alone. And I think the power of that is when you don't feel alone in something, like, it allows you to set that down. Like, we walk through, when I do my wellness retreats, and I see so many of us walk through all this heavy, like you talk about your everyone has baggage, right?
Yeah.
And I think when you share and you find something in common, it's a really great experience to go, okay, I'm not alone, and I actually don't have to carry this. Like, it happened to me, but it's not servicing me anymore, other than it's heavy, right?
Exactly. And so on our pre-call, we coined it as rock bottom, right? And you said to me, rock bottom looks different for everyone. And so for you, it looked like, losing your business, still not totally healed from that 2013 moment in the mirror. Maybe, from 2013 to 2023, when you got the book launched, you were probably, like you said, you still had some blinders on. You were kind of in a bit of avoidance. The business was definitely weighing heavy on you. So then when you decided, okay, I'm going to keep going, this book is actually a healing journey and sharing the story, but your journey is still not over, because now you've decided, I need to leave Saskatchewan. So, and this is where, we as mothers, it's hard enough to leave the family unit, but you're still in the same city. And now you're moving. Yeah. So now what? Where are you headed?
Right? Yeah. So the events were, I published a book, I launched it the 5th October, something around there. I closed down the studio. November 4th, I took 8 women on a retreat to Costa Rica. So I'm still like, game on, finish it, you gotta go. There's the finish line. I know myself that when I return, I'm packing up my apartment and I am putting it in storage. I had the opportunity to go house sit down in Arizona for 2 months. And everyone around me knows that I'm leaving to take a break, to rebrand. And I know probably in the core of me that I'm not coming back. But I wasn't ready yet to share that with everybody because it just still was so surreal. And I was still processing, closing down a studio. You see all these individuals 6 days a week, they become your family. And then that's cut off from you. And I went to Arizona specifically to rebrand, but I went to feel everything.
Right.
Because I didn't want to jump into decisions that were reactions.
Yeah, and irrational, right? When you're telling me this story, I just think, yeah, like we're just always leading with game. Like you just said, it was game on still, game on. Like that masculine energy, that masculine force that just keeps us doing. And so now you've taken this break to, I think, just give yourself some grace and maybe some forgiveness,
Yeah.
So while you're down there, what's pulling you through? Like you said, like just to let go, and just cry.
Yeah, I landed. My niece came with me. I was really lucky that she had some time and she came on the plane with me. I'm so forever grateful for that because it was so hard. And even today, I think about it. And even the last year, I pushed through so hard that sometimes you push through, and when you push through, you don't always allow yourself to feel the pain that you've actually experienced, right? So when I landed in Vegas with her, we went out, of course, one night. It wasn't crazy late, and I wasn't a go out person at that point in my life anyways. But I woke up that morning and I was laying in the bed, and I will never forget, I had this feeling of like this panic attack was coming on strong, and she's oversleeping in the other bed. And I'm like, well, first of all, I'm like, you don't want to freak out in front of your niece.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Right. Exactly.
Role model.
Yeah.
And so I'm because I went through that whole journey of the divorce, finding this and that and all the tools. I laid there and I thought, okay, I'm internally talking to myself now because I had this internal dialogue that I've worked on for a really long time. And I was like, okay, Jodi, what do you got? Like, what do you got right now in this moment that is going to carry you through living in an unknown place with none of your stuff really? Like just what you got in the suitcase. And I took a deep breath and I'm like, okay, gratitude. I have been writing gratitude journaling probably since 2013. Before my feet hit the floor in the morning, there's a notepad beside my bed. I'm journaling.
Wow. That's great.
Anything. And even on I always say that days that are the roughest, I write, I'm grateful for today. Open my eyes. Right. So I can do that every day. My other thing was push-ups. If I don't have a belt with me, I have my body. My body's very capable of doing movement. And I know movement brings positive energy. I feel good. I always can move. No, there's no excuses for me not to move. So I have got gratitude, I have push-ups. And my third one was I have my cup of coffee where I can take a deep breath in. I can close my eyes and I can go, in this very moment, everything's okay.
Yeah.
And those were my 3 staples.
No, that's great. I love that because I actually was going to ask you what shifts helped you move from this like survival mode really to this sort of thriving. And it sort of feels like push through with gratitude, you push through with the push-ups, and then you push through with you've got a cup of coffee, like just be grateful for that and enjoy it. I guess for me, that self-care routine, often we think we can feel like a little bit guilty because maybe it's just confused with self-indulgence. So I feel like those are maybe, I guess, like non-negotiable things for you, Do you do that still today?
Every day.
Yeah. Well, I do see you on Instagram doing your push-ups. What is the push-up routine specifically?
So I get up in the morning, write my gratitude. I go to make my coffee. While my coffee's making, I do my first 50.
50. Okay.
Yeah. And then somewhere midday, I'll do 25. And then if I don't get them in right away, I'll do them just before bed. But
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So fast forward, you're down in Arizona, you come home, you're leaving, you pack everything up and you move to Calgary. And this is how we got to meet each other because now that's where I'm living too.
Yeah.
So, okay. So you get to Calgary, you're still doing maybe some house sitting things. All the while you are still doing your online kettlebell business, correct? Yeah.
So
right.
7 months I did house sitting.
So you're in Calgary, you're doing some house sitting, and now you're I'm going to just ruin the ending for everybody. You're doing wonderful. You're in this beautiful condo in downtown Calgary and running your online kettlebell business. You've got programs that definitely are ready to come out and be shared. So talk a little bit about those.
So I'm here. My online platform allows people the ability to work out at home at their own convenience. I owned a studio, and I realized after when I moved, I was like, I actually never worked out in my studio space because that was my work. So I just it just fit my life better to, have my kettlebells in the living room, have them in my bedroom. I just do my workout, and it allowed me, I would call it now my fitness freedom. I train to feel good, look good, so then I can go out and live my life, because life wasn't meant to be 2-3 hours in a gym like I was doing. It's just not. Now, we're to honor our bodies, not punish ourselves, right? So that you enjoy the workouts. So I have that whole online platform. I keep a roster about 6 to 7 private clients. And then within those, I have a summer strong program that's coming. It's always a challenge that I do in June, which I'm really excited for. And it's a core and glute, and it's a body weight. But again, it's about mindset and creating that relationship with your body. I'm going into, it's going to be my 50th in like 24 days or something.
Your 50th birthday?
Yeah, in 20 days, right? Because it's the 6th today. And there's so many of us that we walk around in these vessels, our bodies, and we don't even really know, we got so distracted that we've forgotten to have a relationship with ourselves on how to move our bodies and how to honor how it's feeling. So any of those programs, and I also have a 12-week program that it's bi-weekly. You get a check-in with me where we do a Zoom, because I love that we actually get to see face to face. But it's about connecting, getting people to reconnect with their body so that, so they can age gracefully, so that they can still move.
Right. All about mobility. And what I can tell you too, and I can tell the audience, is I was big on always like the dumbbells and all that kind of stuff. And then I just recently spent 3 months in Merida, and the gyms were way too far from where I was living. So I thought, you know what? I'm just going to go to Walmart and buy myself a kettlebell, walk out of there with the only kettlebell that was there, which was, I think, 14 kilos. And I thought, oh God, I don't even know what I'm going to do with this thing. I don't even know what 14 kilos is, maybe 30 pounds. I knew I could do some things for 30 pounds, but not everything on 30 pounds, and a yoga mat. And for 3 months, I just worked out doing the kettlebell. And I have to tell you, I think you're right. For me, my body looked completely different. It was much more core, leaner looking. I think there's much more heavier cardio involved with it, even though you're not really doing a cardio, but like just the kettlebell swing. But I really liked it. I think you get really lean and strong with that routine. And now I am in a gym, but I do still 3 or 4 days a week, I am still doing the kettlebell routines. So are your programs, one is the body weight, the summer challenge is the body weight, but is the 12-week program a kettlebell program?
It is eventually. It's you start with body weight, because when you train with me and when you follow, our goal is first body movements. You have to have the body mechanics for it. So you're just starting, we want to just start to move your body and get that going. And then you do 6 sessions of that. And then we roll you into an intro kettlebell. And then there's the featured programs in there. So it's a nice leeway to start and then move into the kettlebell training, especially if you've never done kettlebell. I would highly recommend that would be your start spot for it. And with the bell, when I first did a bell, I never ever shared that story, but again, I was going through that transition period, and I will never forget the first time I picked up a bell, because I felt so at that time in my life, I guess the best word would be not settled, but not grounded. And there was something for me when I had this handle and the swing of the bell. It was the first time I felt grounded. And I know that moment, I knew, and I call it a knowing. And whether you're like, I don't know if I believe what she's talking about, but I always felt like there was a purpose immediately with it, but I never really understood what it would be.
Okay, so I want some life lessons now. So how are you staying grounded now when life is starting to get a little chaotic again? It's ups and downs, and there's probably just as many highs as there are lows, if not even more lows. Who knows? I don't know. But for you, how are you staying grounded?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I wanted to say that, I think the last year when I wrote my book, it's a collection of stories where I had to pick myself up again. And I think we talked about this too. And I think the last year I got to use the tools that I created, and that
Okay.
comes back to, again, my advice would be for stuff like that is when stuff is heavy, and how I stay grounded is keep it simple, because when things are hard, you can't. Like, I mean, when I was in Arizona for those, by myself, I'm used to seeing people 6 days a week, so much so many people that I take Sunday specifically off, and I don't talk to anyone or hang out with anyone other than my children. Like, that's how busy I felt and how immersed I was in people. To now I'm sitting in somebody's house in another country by myself. And there were days that you just feel gross, you feel sad, you feel like you failed. And that journey of you're around that many people and who's really talking to you still. It was almost kind of felt like a divorce again. You go through that thing of like who really hangs around and visits and who,
Yeah.
So it was pretty similar. And for me, it was like just recognizing that day that I needed three things to ground me. My gratitude, my movement, and, that moment. Movement was key for me. And I think it's key to keeping it simple. Also to not, like, wouldn't drink. I remember because I had drinks the night before I woke up with that anxiety attack. We had a couple of glasses of wine. And I remember waking up too thinking, oh, Jodi, don't go down this road. Because in my book, I went down a summer of overindulging. And I thought, oh, it's just such a, like, when you're going through stuff, it is really actually a very slippery slope.
Right.
So,
No, I know. And the first thing we do is like, oh, I just need a glass of wine.
right? Because it's just going to, it'll help. But because I had been through the journey that I had, I knew that the furthest thing from after we had those couple of drinks that night, I was like, I'm not touching anything, because I'm not in the headspace to deal with that. So the last year has been a really find the tools that work, keep it simple, grounding,
and eliminate.
Yes.
And eliminate what is no longer serving you. And I can probably tell you, alcohol doesn't serve anybody. So what advice would you have for women in midlife who feel a little stuck in a version of themselves that they've outgrown? And I can probably tell you there's a lot of those women out there.
Yeah. Well, first you have to try things. When you try things, it doesn't have to mean you're trying things to like them. Maybe you're trying them to not like them. Like, and then you kind of start to compile a list of, because I was so lost that I didn't even know who I was. And the ironic thing is I remember sitting with a friend at lunch, and I remember saying, oh, I've changed so much, blah, 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 blah. And she grew up with me in high school. And she looked at me and she starts laughing. And I was like, what's so funny about that?
Yeah.
And she's like, you know what? She said, you are who I knew in high school.
Yeah.
And not that it wasn't the person that didn't grow, but we put
When you
on
lost
all
yourself.
all these layers, right? And I always say when you be, it's kind of like the unbecoming of what you kind of built, right? Or what you thought you needed to build as your persona, as your person, right? So I would just say to people, like, just start exploring, but don't sit with not, like, if I would say, like, even like moving your body, like that's why I do what I do, because there's movement and mindset. If you're struggling, go for a walk. Because when you move your body, you're creating a positive energy flow within your body. And that, if you build on that, that allows you, I still think that day in the gym saved me. And I think
that
my
2013 day, like that,
the day that I felt like it was the worst day because I had to own my crap. But it was my training. I feel like my training said, okay, Jodi, we got you here. We got you in front of this mirror, own it and fix it. And I don't think
that's really good.
I think I maybe I would have avoided it more, right? Or something, but it was just getting to that point where I go, wow, I'm super strong. Why does it hurt so much here?
So how do you think women can trust themselves to do things for themselves after years probably of putting so many others first?
Really good question too. And it's just about exploring, right? I always say like my women that I train that are in marriages or in relationships, I'm like, nurture those, right? But nurture yourself too. I've learned so much about what a partner looks like to me now than what it did and what I grew up knowing it looked like, what I thought it looked like. And just even the past, like the last summer, I went on a retreat for 5 days to write for a magazine, and it was a women's retreat. And I remember the cottage was just pretty. And I remember sitting in there and I was like, because like we talk about being in that masculine energy, like get her done. I'm here. I'm strong. I'm capable. And here I'm in this little cottage. And I'm like, I'm actually probably grinning ear from ear because I'm like it feels so good to be in a space that's pretty. And I remember when I got my apartment, I really set the intention of how, and I think for women too, like moving through that space of setting an intention of how you want things to feel. And I think ironically enough, I would be like, I'm such a goal setter, a number setter, a time amount, a rep amount. But last summer, I walked away from that going, feel, and to allow the femininity to come back and go, there's such a part of me that I'd closed off. And I think even in the roles that we take as women, we kind of close things off too in those roles instead of like, let's open that up. And, everyone always talks about take things from a place of love. And as nurturers, we do, but I would question people and say, do we though? Because when you look at yourself internally, and I sat with this and I wrote about this last week about your greatest love when I first started my journey in life was my ex-husband, right? Like you get married, you think that's your greatest love. And then I had these 3 babies. And every time I had one, I was like, oh my God, I've fallen so in love with these humans. And I fell so in love with my children. And I think every time I fell in love with someone else, I forgot to love myself.
Yeah, totally.
And you give and you give. And then about a week ago, I was like, definition of loving yourself. What does that look like? And really loving yourself enough to open yourself up. And that was the big thing that I sat with. I'm like, have I allowed that? And if I'm not allowing that, then I'm still not loving myself completely.
Yeah. So, okay, I have a question for you then. What, when you think about dating again, I don't know if you are dating now, but what does the voice in your head say? Is it all in, cautious, doubtful?
Yeah. No, we would have had this conversation probably 3 months ago. I'd be like, I would probably surface talk to you. And I'd be like, oh yeah, I think it's important to let people in and I can talk smack.
Yeah.
But I really sat with it probably 2 weeks ago. And I thought, when you build walls, you don't serve yourself. And I really had to sit with that because I feel like I've done the work. I think I've done the work. I show up, I allow people in. And I was wrong because I had built walls now. Understanding the true of again, circling back to the greatest love, I think is yourself. And we walk through life, it's a reflection, right? You give. And then when you stop and look at yourself about how do you love yourself? And if you don't let people in properly, or even I know boundaries are fabulous because they create a safe space. And I think, if you're learning to trust people again, boundaries is a good thing that you need. But I do think you need to understand that you have to open yourself up, because if you're not opening yourself up, you're avoiding. And if you're avoiding, you're not really embracing everything that you need to be embraced. And I remember a friend of mine back in Saskatchewan, we were talking about dating again. And she's like, well, just start dating. And I was like, yeah, but what if it's a train wreck and it everything, the wheels fall off? And I remember her saying, yeah, but you've done the work. And if it doesn't work, then you're okay. Yeah. So I didn't date for a long time because I knew I wasn't ready. I knew I was doing the work, but I knew that the wheels would fall off.
Right.
Right.
And did you believe that you were lovable, or did you think that you weren't lovable and that's why you weren't dating, or you just felt you weren't ready to bring that, I guess, to receive it? Or
I love that question because, we always talk about I'm worth it. And we're like, yeah, I'm worth it. But you gotta really sit with that question. And are you?
Yeah.
I think if you understand you're ready to have a healthy chance, right? Because it's all like, but because if you're not, because I dated some things that, like, I look back now and I'm like, yeah, I wasn't ready because what I allowed in.
Yeah. Oh, I was just going to ask you that. Exactly.
And that's a great thing to look at. And that says a lot. I could always look at what kind of relationships I was in. Well, I would never play the blame game because when it was kind of ick, I'm like, I own that. And I'm like, it's
Yeah.
where I was at.
I that's really interesting because I think too, like, I wonder if we only let in what we think we are.
I would say, yeah. I would say yes.
Right. And then so when you say, well, you have to think that you're worth it, is there a label that you put? Like, is there a definition you put around worth it? Or is just that you are worth it because you deserve it? You deserve that kind of love.
Yeah. Like, do I put a definition with it?
Yeah. Like worth
Yeah,
it.
like I think I do but I've had to do some work where I always said I was worth it, but I didn't think I felt it.
Yeah. That's what I'm getting at. Like,
Yeah.
because we can say, oh God, yeah, of course. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
I'm
Well,
totally worth it.
that's what I mean. We all walk
Yeah.
around with, and it's sometimes we toss these words around, but they're so much deeper than just the word itself. And again, I think it's coming back to, do you, the basics? Do you move your body to take care of it? Like, that's worth, right? Do you put good food in it? Do you hang around good people that are positive? Like, those are all things that make your life worthy, right?
Yeah, that's good.
So
Yeah.
I think, and it's a big reflection thing where you sit down, and I think everybody, I think everybody's worth it, but you
Yeah.
have to find what that means to you, and you
Yeah.
have to really feel it, right? It's kind of
Yeah.
like, I talk to my kids about being proud. It's kind of the same thing, because nobody can give you that feeling, right? Like, somebody can say, I'm proud of you. Well, it kind of feels good, but do you remember the things you've done in life where you're like, freaking I did it,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And you're like, and I always say, when you train, like when you do hard things, sometimes we'll do like hard challenges, like an hour, we're going to swing the kettlebell for an hour, 20 seconds, you get 30 seconds rest, but you're going to consistently do that for an hour. Right. And it's hard, but it's like, when you're done, it has zero to do with the fact that you swung a kettlebell for an hour.
Exactly.
But it has
No,
everything
I
to do
agree.
with, I did it, and nobody in the room can tell me I didn't, right?
Yeah.
Because it's just
No.
that thing. So I think it's that worth too on the inside that you have to work on, so that you can say it, but you know it because you feel it, right?
No, that's good. All right, my final question. You go back to 2013 version of yourself. What would you whisper in her ear?
I think I would say, be brave, love yourself every step of the way. I just would want to give her some assurance and some love that she could carry through on those days that
Absolutely.
were heavy,
Absolutely. Jodi, where can people find you?
You can find me at kbstronger.com for training. And I'm also Facebook, KB Stronger, Jodi Barrett platform, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, in all those spaces. I even live on TikTok a little bit. But yes, in all those places, please feel free to DM me a message, even if it's just to say, hi, I watched you with Lynette, and I just wanted to reach out and connect.
That sounds wonderful. Jodi, thank you for being on the show today. You're amazing. You've got a great story and a great one of resilience and coming through it. So well done, girl. Well done. Looking forward to going for a walk in the mountains one day with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure.
Hey, it's Lynette. Thanks for listening today. Please like and subscribe. And if there's somebody out there that you think could benefit from the episode, give it a share. Midlife is your time, so go get it.